Hello and welcome to this Oak Tree English video on how to write talks and speeches for functional skills, GCSE and life. When you see the question on an exam asking you to write a talk, you should start thinking about your audience and purpose. As ever, audience can be analysed on a kind of matrix along with style of writing. So one axis runs from formal to informal, determining how much slang or contractions one might use. The other axis runs from personal to impersonal, depending on how many people you're talking to. So if it is a general audience, such as a talk or a report, it is impersonal. If it's written to one individual recipient, such as a letter or an email, then it is personal. A talk falls into impersonal and informal. This means that you're talking to a wider audience, not just to one person, but you are speaking as yourself, not as the formal version of yourself. The purpose of the talk will fall into, as always, one of four rough groups: persuasive, informative, descriptive, or instructive. PIDI for short. That's an example of each of these from the spoken world. Persuasive would include any party political broadcast which is telling you to vote for the monster raving loony party. Other political parties are available. I'm not advocating for any particular political party. Informative would be like a TV documentary. It presents evidence, but it doesn't reach a conclusion. A descriptive text would describe, such as a friend talking about their latest adventure to the South Pole. I have a friend who actually went to the South Pole and gave a talk at an expo and stuff, which was rather cool. Cool. South Pole was cool. And instructive is like, for example, a YouTube video telling you step by step how to pass certain exams. See the other videos on this channel, for example. That was persuasive. There'll often be some overlap between the groups. A talk could fall into almost any group depending on the question you're answering. The question will make it explicit who your audience is and what your purpose is. Well, we've talked about a question. Let's look at a couple. Once you've identified your audience and purpose, which shouldn't take more than about 30 seconds, it's time to make your plan. If you have an artistic mind, then you can plan using a mind map. Have a look at this suggestion for this GCSE style question. You have been asked to give a talk to your class with the title, "The Person I'd Most Like to Spend a Day With." Your talk could be about a person who is famous, such as a sports person, musician, inventor, or national figure, someone from the past, or someone who is not necessarily well known, but who you admire. Write what you would say in your talk. So this question tells you your audience. The audience is your class, which means it's your peers, therefore it's informal. The style, which is in this case a talk, and even the topic, the person I'd most like to spend the day with. It gives certain suggestions to start your creativity off: a famous sports person, musician, inventor or national figure, a historical figure like C.S. Lewis, who's pictured here and who would be my choice, or someone less well known but whom you admire, like your dad. You can outline your paragraphs, perhaps one on who. So you put company for a day in the middle. You can outline your paragraphs. Perhaps you'd like to write one on who you want to spend that day with. Why it is you'd like to meet them. Who are they? For C.S. Lewis, for example, who is he? He's an Irish author who was educated in Oxford and is and wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, among many other fantastic and fascinating books. You would say what you'd like to do or where you'd like to take them. Well, C.S. Lewis used to like going for long walks in the countryside, and so do I. So I'd probably quite like to take him for a nice walk up into some of the hills that I enjoy walking on. And perhaps you'd like to write another paragraph on what you would say to them, what you might tell them, like that he's totally inspired me in many ways, that I really appreciate the depth of his writing and the variety. Or perhaps I'd like I might like to ask him questions. What would I like to say to him? I'd say, how did you come up with the idea of it? Which order do you think the books ought to be read in? That sort of thing. Which is your favorite book? I know the answers to most of those. But yeah, what would you tell them? Obviously, on top of this, you would start with an introduction, which rephrases the question and outlines the direction of the answer, and a conclusion, which sums up the points you have made and shows how they connect to the question. That's how you might plan this like an artist. Would you like to see how this could be planned like a lawyer? Well, here we have our very own lawyer, who's going to explain to us how. That's the one over there. Not me. I'm not a lawyer. Definitely not. So to plan like a lawyer, we plan each paragraph and then subdivide it into individual sentences. Here's another GCSE question. Whoosh! You've been asked to give a talk to your class about your hobby or special interest to try to encourage others to get involved. Write what you would say in your talk. So this is a 20 marker from a component 2 on the Edexcel exam. Now you can break this down into paragraphs and then further into individual sentences like this. You always start with an introduction, where you tell them what you're going to tell them, and end with a conclusion. Oh dear, it's done something funny on me again. So in your introduction, you would rephrase the question and introduce the activity that you're going to talk about and encourage others to get involved with it. When I say introduce the activity, you say, I'm going to talk about chicken wrestling. Then you would talk, you talk in your next paragraph in more detail about that activity. So you might say where you do it, in a chicken wrestling ring, of course, what it actually entails. So that it involves catching the chicken and then making sure that it can't flap too much. What you need for it? Well, you need a good chicken wrestling costume, and of course you need a chicken. You might talk about who goes to these events. Well, some of them are a little bit shady, so you be careful of the shady element of the chicken wrestling world. But also, when does this happen? Well, this happens every Friday night down the local pub. I'm making all of this up. I don't go to a local pub where they have a chicken wrestling ring with shady people. Well, there are some shady people in the pub, but yeah. Move on. You might talk about why. Remember, this is a persuasive talk. Why do you do it? Well, it's enjoyable. And you get to eat the chickens afterwards. It's healthy. You get a little bit of exercise, and the chickens are usually fairly low in fat. And then you need to encourage people to join in. So what the sport or the activity offers, unlimited feathers, and why else do they do it? Well, it's free to join the Chicken Wrestling Guild this month. I feel I'm talking about chicken wrestling a little bit too much. And then, of course, you have a conclusion. In your conclusion, you tell them what you've told them. So once again, you rephrase the question using different words, using different, using a range of vocabulary. You talk about the who, what, where, why, where, and when. The who, what, where, and when. And then perhaps finish off with why and encourage other people to do it. So this is how I would imagine planning your talk. I call this planning like a lawyer, and I've done it quite small, so in quite a small way, so that it fits on the page. You would obviously expand that to about five sentences per point. Talks have a number of distinguishing organizational features. You should start, for example, with a title. In this case, this is one from the Alpha course, which I totally ripped off the internet and shoved on here. So it gives a title: Talk 1, is there more to life than this? Given that this was designed to be given in a prison, you would jolly well hope so. Moving on. Start with the title. If you don't have a good title to begin with, then leave space and come back at the end. When you've done your plan, you'll probably have a good idea for the title, but very often the best works are titled at the end. You never start with the title, or rarely start with the title. Your talk will probably have subheadings, because that makes your notes easier to follow when you're speaking. Uniquely, talks can include bracketed stage directions, like read slowly for effect, or pause dramatically, or speak extra loud. In this example from a prison Alpha course, it suggests a timing of 20 minutes. As with almost every form of writing, you'll need to write in paragraphs. You are marked on this structure, so don't neglect it. Including subheadings will remind you to split it into paragraphs. It may be helpful, as in this example, to summarize certain points in a bulleted format. If you think how you speak, you may find that you don't always use orthodox grammar. That's fine, so long as it's properly set out and punctuated with semicolons, colons, and indeed bullet points. Trying to make sure that you've got each of those in place will really help. Language features. Now, here we go. You can go a little bit crazy here. Language devices can be divided into content, language, imagery, and pronunciation. And in each category, there are appropriate devices to use in talks. You've got much more scope to use devices when using informal language. So make sure you make full use of your repertoire. In content, for example, talks can make good use of anecdotes for personal connection, and of course, irony. Irony can be difficult to employ without tone of voice to support it, so this is the place to do so. In the category of language, you can fill your talk to hello, that wasn't supposed to happen. You can fill your talk to overflowing with things like hyperbole, emotive language, and repetition. But the one I think would serve you best is employing the rule of 3. I just did that. Did you notice? Yeah. Hyperbole, emotive language, and repetition. That's rule of 3. This is when you list 3 related things to make a point. Watch Prime Minister's questions if you're in the UK and see how politicians go over the same 3 points again and again. Imagery is most at home in the domain of the informal. Now is the time to use metaphors, personification, and similes. There's another rule of 3. Did you like that? But I would suggest sprinkling in some allegory along the way, as this is a good way to make a point relatable and engaging. See Pilgrim's Progress for an example par excellence. Pronunciation devices are especially useful in a talk, as they are designed to be heard. So alliteration can be emphasized, rhyme can be employed, and sibilance can be hissed. But the one I want to recommend to gain attention and amusement is onomatopoeia. Oh, I wrote down rhyme there. I meant to write onomatopoeia. It's difficult to spell. Forgive me. This is where you use a word that sounds like the thing it's describing, like hiss or growl and roar, for example. Okay, that may have just blasted some people's headphones, so apologies if you're listening on headphones. So in conclusion, to write a talk for an exam or for life, Remember to determine whether it is persuasive, instructive, descriptive, or informative. It should be planned out, either like an artist or a lawyer, depending on your own personality, and should include title, subheadings, and paragraphs, with an option for on-stage directions and bullet points. Make sure it's written in a personal manner with appropriate language and plenty of language devices. As I've said before, write something that you enjoy and that will come across to the examiner. I hope you've enjoyed this video on writing a talk. If so, please remember to like, share and subscribe. Thanks very much. Goodbye.